as we shift gears here and go from banking to antitrust, we welcome in our next guest, which is Yaël Ossowski, the Deputy Director of Consumer Center. Thanks for joining us, first off, and looking forward to your thoughts on this. My first thought was this is going to take a long time. So what do we know so far, I guess, and what do you kind of expect to unfold?
So this is, I guess, the first case right now of the FTC under the Trump administration, and we had the opening statements that were given in court yesterday in D.C., both from the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, and from Meta. And essentially, it's a conversation about whether Facebook, Meta, Instagram, is it a monopoly? And does the government have the power to force Meta to sell off WhatsApp and Instagram? These are the kind of arguments that are being discussed right now. Plenty of different definitions that are thrown around, plenty of different legalistic definitions, many different tries to define the market, to figure out what is personal social networking versus social networking versus pictures. But overall, it really is the first test for the Trump administration's new chair at the FTC, Andrew Ferguson. And they're plowing through with this case, and there are plenty other cases against some of the large American tech companies to come.
So, okay, I thought this was the whole point of a new administration was that we were going to be in a more regulatory friendly or lack thereof environment, and that we were going to see some of these CEOs that definitely cozied up to Trump during the election and even after that see more favorability. But that has not been the case so far for Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, is this really a move of politics?
Well, it's definitely about power. I don't know about politics, but, this is the case that was first launched during Trump's first administration. A judge threw it out. They tried again in the Biden administration. So in a way, it's actually Trump carrying forward with not only what he did in the first term, but also with Biden's administration. So the FTC, the sort of antitrust forces who are in Washington, they've been very focused on this case. They've had Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, they've had them in their crosshairs for a very long time. And of course, it's an interesting moment, as you know, because you've had many of the different tech CEOs who've been very friendly to Donald Trump. He's been very conciliatory. And at the same time, we've got all kind of global regulatory players that are gunning for these companies. And then the rise of China that's providing a lot of competition. So it really is changing the conversation a bit in D.C., but it really is an interesting test to see what this administration will do and whether these changes are going to be good for users and consumers of these platforms.
I'm always kind of focused here, Yaël, on what is a reasonable range of outcomes. So you mentioned sort of the forced sale. So it sounds like that would sort of be the negative outcome maybe for Meta. But again, they'd be getting money or however that would play out. Like it's not a zero-sum game here necessarily. And then I guess on the other side, some sort of dismissal, some sort of fine, that would be sort of your good outcome. Is there somewhere in between that you think that this is going to land on, or is it kind of those two possible outcomes?
Well, if I'm a next-gen investor, I'm looking at the prediction markets, you have to look at the amount of capital, time, energy that Zuckerberg and co. have put into cozying up to Trump. And, it's worth something. They've already paid him for sort of previous deplatformings that happened. They settled a lawsuit. And that could happen in this case here. You could have a settlement. They wouldn't actually have to have the rest of the trial, which is supposed to last for several months. I mean, we're talking about all the different witnesses, all the types of discovery, emails. All of that could be avoided if they did settle. I would think that there's a little bit of momentum there, but we're not really sure. The FTC wants to make an example because they have other cases. They have Apple in the Justice Department. They have Amazon they're going after next. It's really going to be difficult, though, for the president and his supporters to continue to talk about American tech abroad, and particularly when we think of the European Union and many other regulators that are threatening and fining many of our companies. We're basically doing the same thing here at home. And I think that really is going to put pressure on this case. Obviously, we do have a fair system of justice in the United States, but it is a test for how justice, how antitrust, and what all of this means in the 21st century, because we're not dealing with railroads and airlines anymore. We're talking about technology and digital services, and this stuff is very messy and complicated.
Okay, and do you see this perhaps being any catalyst for some of its closest competition? I say competition lightly because, frankly, there isn't really a major threat to Meta because of the various companies now that it owns. But, like the TikTok conversation, Snap, all the various social media companies. Could this be then positive for them because they're not actually, obviously at the hand of right now the U.S. government and some of the legal mitigation that follows.
Well, it was just a few months ago that Google, which owns YouTube, was also declared to be a monopolist by the U.S. government. So again, it's only going to help YouTube, which again has way more millions of monthly views than any of the Meta platforms. But it's true, there's huge growth already in things like TikTok and Snapchat. And that's part of Meta's case here, is that there is plenty of competition in this space. And there are plenty of different apps. You have all kinds of new spin-offs, a lot of money and function, and now state power behind X and Twitter. So I think there you're probably going to have an uptick. Likely that's something that the government is forcing. But we have to look at what consumers want and what users want. And right now they like to have their pictures and videos and reels on Instagram. They also like to use TikTok. They like to cross-post and share. I mean, particularly millennials, Gen Z, we're using all these different types of platforms. And there's not really a single monopoly at the moment. And I think that's why the antitrust law has to kind of catch up to it right now and figure out exactly how we're going to decide these cases going forward, because this is not going to be the last one. As I mentioned, there are the other cases against some of the tech companies. And when we talk about AI companies in the future, what is that going to look like? And what is that going to look like when we're talking about the effect of tariffs and sanctions and Chinese competitors? There's just a larger conversation. If we want the U.S. to dominate, if we want the U.S. to be strong and to have a good economy with digital services, we have to look at the laws right now that are probably restricting some of that, and then also see if there are better products out there. And I think that's why consumers should choose the winners rather than the courts.
Yeah, and choose the winners rather than maybe the biggest and the baddest on the street, because that is definitely what's dominated, unfortunately, so much of tech for years now. But we so appreciate it, and this is going to be a story I'm sure we continue to discuss for many months ahead. So we will, I hope, be talking about this again, maybe with some more developments on how it's impacting Meta. Thank you so much, Yaël Osowski, the Deputy Director of Consumer Choice Center.